What is up, fantasy people? You are back, and this is the True North Fantasy Pod presented by Monkey Knife Fight. I am Trav, coming in live from Dirty Laundry Studios 2.0. As always, co-hosting and West Coasting with me, Tyrell McLaughlin. How are you on this fine Wednesday evening, my man?
I am living the dream.
Yeah, it's good to get back, man. We didn't have an episode last week. Actually, both of us were a little bit under the weather. You were in much rougher shape than I, my man. So I am happy you are on the mend. It's good to get back in the lab, I was saying. Hopefully I can remember how to do this before the show. And we're live right now, and everything's gone without a hitch so far. So that is a good sign. To check out all of our work, Ty, the people can go to truenorthffb.com. And then on the site, we got the site there. And then the socials, of course, are True North FFB everywhere aside from Facebook, actually, which is True North Fantasy Football in its entirety. So that's where all the articles are pumping. That's where all the shows are. We have 4 shows a week and I think 5+ articles a week as well. So really, really busy group we got. Thankful for all the guys for all the work that they're putting in there. And that's where you can find these 2 clowns that you're looking at right now, myself and Ty.
No, and speaking of thankful, very thankful for the Fantasy Points Media Group. We're obviously very proud members of that entity.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you just talk about believing in what we were talking about that earlier about believing in kind of what you have to rep and stuff like that. And yeah, I just love to be in this relationship that we're in with the Fantasy Points Media Group. And it really is just an ensemble of elite analysts, and they're all just atop their field serving these niches. They're all invested in this thing. That's what I really love, because a number of them are also co-owners of fantasypoints.com. So I just think it's the place to get the best info from the best sources to be getting your info from. And there it's filtered and distilled and put it all in one place for you. So it's tailored to whatever format you need. And if you're using the promo code 21TrueNorth10, all caps, it's also the best way to support the pod for sure. So what's on the agenda tonight, Trav?
On the agenda is actually a fun episode, Ty. We're veering off the normal path a little bit. We're not necessarily diving so far into the week 11 content. The boys will be doing lots of that on the site and on the other shows as well. We wanted to do a little check-in on the 2021 rookie class, Ty. I think, we mentioned a couple shows ago that we were going to start peppering in some dynasty takes. So we'll definitely have some season-long stuff peppered in here. But a lot of this stuff is going to be talking about the rookies that we've seen for the first 10 weeks of this season. And we're going to talk about how it's unfolded and a little bit of dynasty rankings talk, which I'm really excited to get into. It was fun to update those bad boys. But yeah, I'm excited to fire in, Ty. Lots of good stuff coming from this rookie class, man.
Yeah, well, let's do it right away, because we have kind of 3 special players, at least from like fantasy asset perspectives, with Ja'Marr Chase, Najee Harris, and Kyle Pitts. So I want to just start right away and ask, what are you prioritizing in a dynasty startup in that first round? Because I think we could agree that at least Ja'Marr Chase and Najee Harris are probably at least borderline, if not guaranteed, first round picks in dynasty startups next season. So are you prioritizing running back or wide receiver, or do the talents still matter?
Yeah, well, I think all of it really matters. I think generally I lean towards running back early, because I think having that core previously, from my experience, having that core of running backs where you have some depth that when guys go down with injury, you can fill them in with adequate starters instead of just like jamokes off the waiver wire, is definitely a much easier way to play, maybe a little bit less stressful to play. But I think this season has shown me that I might look to, go a little bit more wide receiver at the top of the draft in certain situations, maybe depending on where I'm picking and what the run of running backs looks like. But I mean, for me, I think I would probably prioritize Ja'Marr Chase over Najee Harris right now, just because the longevity that it looks like he's going to have in that Bengals defense or offense, with kind of a new look Bengals squad that looks like they're going to be a little bit frisky in that AFC. So I'm kind of liking his outlook, but like, don't get me wrong, I love me some Najee as well. So it's still one that I might be a little undecided, but right now I probably lean a little bit more towards the longevity of the wide receiver, and trust myself to build that running back core with my second, third, maybe later on picks, right?
So let's start with Jamar Chase then really quick and dive a little deeper, because I want to know how high is too high. Like, where do you have Jamar Chase in your dynasty ranks amongst wide receivers overall even?
I have him as my dynasty wide receiver 1, Ty. I put him up there. I'm cool with it. I think it's time. It's hard because we've had this tier at the top for seemingly forever, where it's Devonte Adams, Tyreek Hill. You got your Stephon Diggs peppering in there, DeAndre Hopkins, all those guys who have been, core members of our rosters for a long time. But I think now is the time, Ty, where we need to see these young guys come up there, because from a dynasty lens, if you look at Jamar Chase, I mean, the guy's putting up top 5 numbers from the jump in a season-long setting. Like, why does that not translate into a dynasty setting with just further continuity, further growth with Joe Burrow in that offense? So that's kind of why I have him in as my wide receiver 1 for dynasty. It's pretty close. I got CD in there as well, Justin Jefferson near there as well, but Jamar Chase just takes that cake for me, because what we've seen this year is historic, and we saw that from Justin Jefferson this year, and Jamar Chase is at least equaling that, and just doing gritties all over the place, Ty. So I've been loving what I'm seeing, and just in all facets of the field, he's getting it done. So I like Jamar Chase as my wide receiver 1. How about you? Are you up there with it? Is he up there?
Yeah, he is also my wide receiver 1. I think you named the names that we needed to name at the end there with CD Lamb, former teammate Justin Jefferson. But what I love is most of the success has come via pure efficiency, right? And there's room for the volume to increase almost across the board. And Chase has a monopoly on the most valuable work in this offense across the board. Like, he's 19th amongst wide receivers in targets, 5th in receiving. He's 2nd in fantasy points scored over expectation on RotoViz. And it really is just the high leverage work. Like, he has a 25 or 26% target share on the team. He's seen over 40% of the air yards. He's seen the 3rd highest share of his team's air yards in the NFL. 9 of 17 end zone targets in Cincinnati have gone to Jamar Chase, according to PFF. And nobody is scoring from 40 yards or more than Jamar Chase. He leads the NFL in 40-plus yard touchdowns. So he's scoring from out wide, seeing all the air yards, and he's also being keyed in on, when the Bengals get in close. And I just think, going forward, Cincinnati could just flat out pass the ball more. I mean, we've talked a lot about how the Bengals have just been more successful and more run heavy than, anticipated. And the end zone targets could go way up. Like I mentioned, those end zone targets, that monopoly, because only 4 teams have fewer red zone trips than Cincinnati. So that could go way up, I think. And the air yards could go up too. I mean, they're averaging under 260 intended air yards per game, and that's way down from just under 300 last season. So, and he's already that elite deep ball touchdown guy. So I really love Jamar Chase. I think you also look at the fact that rookies score more fantasy points in the second half of the season. So I think you could still buy this guy, and the situation could only get better in Cincinnati for a wide receiver. And then you add in the chemistry with this quarterback, the scheme. I would just have a hard time passing on Jamar Chase, even if I have like the 101 in my dynasty.
That's pretty close.
So how high is too high for Najee Harris? Do you think Najee Harris is also like a first round bona fide pick in a startup?
I think so. He's my running back 4 right now. And so, with the ways drafts have been going, you see running backs come off hard in the first round, and he's going to be one of those guys. Looking at my overall rankings right now, he's my number 7 overall dynasty player. So definitely a first round pick. I would consider taking him in the top 5, just because what we've seen in not the greatest situation already, right? He's putting up huge games. He got that 14 target game, which really shows that they're going to rely on him in that aspect, which is what you want to see out of that top 5 guy. And I think there's just room for efficiency to grow for Najee. You put out some really good tweets a couple weeks back, Ty, about the historic touch numbers we're going to see from him. I think basically what it laid out is that we haven't seen a rookie running back at this heavy a workload since LaDainian Tomlinson, which is like 20 years ago. So that's pretty awesome for Najee. Obviously, I'm going to give you a chance to dive in here because he is on your Steelers, Ty. But I think it's going to be really, really good for the long term for Najee, as long as those targets maintain, because I think he's probably top 5 in running back target numbers right now. And, we love it.
Yeah, I think he's 2nd in running back targets, 2nd in carries amongst running backs. And that's how you see the crazy opportunities that he's seen. And it's kind of interesting because we talked about Jamar Chase. He's doing it entirely different. It's volume. That's the name of the game for Najee Harris. And Yeah, I think he's averaging over 25 touches per game or 25 opportunities, like targets plus rush attempts. And yeah, I just think going forward, it's hard to see that not continuing with, the quarterback play uncertain. There's a lot of ambiguity. So the offense could continue to run almost entirely through Najee Harris. And you think about poor quarterback play that lends to dump offs, bad offensive line lends to dump offs to the running back position. I was actually looking at @FF_Spaceman's database yesterday. Somebody whose Patreon I subscribe to. And Najee Harris has been so Jonathan Taylor has 8 top 12 finishes this season. Najee has 7, and no other running back has more than 5 RB1 finishes this season. So Najee broke his 7 straight games as a top 12 guy last week. It was quite the streak, but he finished as the RB14. So 8 straight games where Najee's been a top 14 running back or top 15 running back in fantasy, which is just ridiculous. So I'm with you. I still have Jamar Chase over him in a dynasty startup just because of that longevity and some of that built-in chemistry. I think he's that special as well. But yeah, I don't like once you're past the names like Christian McCaffrey, maybe Alvin Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Saquon, I guess. And then you're getting to guys like Najee Harris, DeAndre Swift, and I'm definitely taking someone like Najee Harris over a Derrick Henry or an Antonio Gibson or something like that.
Well, do you think running back, I think it's pretty fair to say running back 1 overall seasons are within Najee's range of outcomes, right? Because if you look at his season right now, he has all that work, but he's only got 5 total touchdowns, 1 receiving touchdown, room for that to grow. So I think some really big spike touchdown seasons could be coming from him as well. So yeah, like you said, the only 3 running backs I have ahead of him are Christian McCaffrey, Jonathan Taylor, and Alvin Kamara right now, just because of the rushing work. And I think that the fact that his targets could heavily increase with the offense getting right there. But Najee's it, man. And must be nice for you as a Steelers fan to have that dog in the backfield just locked down, eh?
Yeah, no, I mean, if you care about this kind of stuff, I'm looking at the leaderboard here for fantasy points scored by rookie running backs post NFL merger. You got names like Marcus Allen, Saquon, Eric Dickerson, Edgerrin James, Zeke Elliott, Billy Sims, Fred Taylor, Alvin Kamara, Clinton Portis, and then you get at number 12, Najee Harris, Sam Javine, Herschel Walker, Doug Martin, Matt Forte, a guy who a lot of people comped him to. These are just crazy comps, Kareem Hunt, Marshall Faulk, Barry Sanders, Curtis Martin, Adrian Peterson, James Robinson, Leonard Fournette. These are really high-end running backs who've had good careers. So it's just it should make dynasty owners really optimistic that you can get some top 5 seasons out of Najee Harris for years to come in Pittsburgh. Speaking of which, what about Kyle Pitts? Is he the dynasty tight end 1 overall now in your books?
He is. Yeah, I have him there now. It's just set in stone, right? The uncertainty that's around Calvin Ridley. I mean, Calvin Ridley probably does come back if you ask me. And I think that's totally fine to even keep him in that tight end 1 overall rank with Calvin Ridley healthy and soaking up targets, because it's those 2 guys or bust for my book. With maybe some Cordell Patterson snuck in there as well, but we'll see how long-term he is on that team and what that looks like. He's hurt right now for sure. But yeah, from a dynasty perspective, I think we're starting to see what he can do with the targets. He's got a ton of targets, 20% in the last 5 games of the team's targets. And so I think, when we see him putting up 7 receptions for 100+ yards, that's kind of like wide receiver shit. And that's what we expected from Kyle Pitts. So honestly, it's not a surprise that he's a tight end 1 overall. I think maybe he did it a little bit earlier in my mind than I thought he might do it, but he's doing it. And I think, if you can sell a Travis Kelce to a contender for Kyle Pitts, I think straight up, I would probably do that. Do you think you would do that right now, Ty, or would it be team specific or just straight up blanket?
I mean, if I'm rebuilding, yeah, if I'm a rebuilding team, absolutely, I'm making that move. If I'm a contender, I'm not making that move, I don't think, or at least I'd want a little bit of a sweetener still. But I definitely am going to rank Kyle Pitts as my tight end 1, I think, in a dynasty startup just because of what he offers. I think there's going to be questions to ask. Matt Ryan's at the tail end of his career. And just you look at the lack of efficiency, the lack of touchdown upside, there's questions to ask. What is, not up for debate is that he is a special talent and he's being used in a very unique fashion. And you think of Evan Ingram's season from a few years ago, it's not totally, it kind of reminds me of that when it comes to usage. And we could see Kyle Pitts break some of these records like rookie targets by a rookie tight end and stuff. I think he's on pace to, at least for a guy who's not a New York Giant, like I think it could just be Jeremy Shockey and Evan Ingram would be ahead of him.
Yeah.
But the receiving yards is like, he's really efficient with these catches. The average depth of target is sensational for a tight end. And I think it's just Mike Ditka. When you look at all-time tight end receiving yards per game with Kyle Pitts sitting at around 67 yards per game, which is like, I think 1,000-yard receiving season pace, even in a 16-game schedule. So it's thanks to him basically being used as a wide receiver. Like he's been in line under 20% of the time, like almost 80% of the time he's out wide or in the slot. Yeah. And he's averaging, like he's leading tight ends in air yards. He's seeing almost 30% of the Falcons' air yards. Does that continue next season when Calvin Ridley is most likely back in the picture? Maybe they add other weapons as well. They're going to have a high draft pick, I would imagine. And then Cordell Patterson, what's happening with him? So I think there's room for him to really start firing over the second half of his rookie season here and break some rookie tight end records. But maybe his value jumps the shark a tad. Like if he's going in first rounds of tight end premium dynasty startups, which I imagine that will be the case.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I might have a hard time making that move. I think
I would too.
And almost half his fantasy points have come in just those two games against the Dolphins and Jets too. So he's been, a tad boomer bust, and it does go back to the touchdowns, I think is kind of why.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think like we're talking first round, obviously it's tight end premium you're talking, but that's like Jamar Chase levels. And I think where he differs from Jamar Chase is just that as a tight end designation, he's naturally going to have some games where he has a little bit less snap share, right? Like he's only been over 80% snaps twice, where Jamar Chase is consistently over 90% kind of target hog, right? Obviously we're not comparing them necessarily like apples to apples, but I just think it's really hard for me to take a tight end in the first round. Travis Kelce, I have at the end of the first rounds here and there, but I'm not quite ready to say that Kyle Pitts is going to do what we've seen Travis Kelce do over the past 5-6 years. You know what I mean? So I do have him as my tight end 1, but I'm not necessarily ready to say that he's going to be giving me those top 10 wide receiver numbers like we've seen from Travis Kelce quite yet.
And that's like, if you're in a tight end premium, are you going to pass on a DeAndre Swift at the back end of the first? Like, are you going to pass on some of these names to take Kyle Pitts when you could maybe get Travis Kelce at the end of the second? That's going to be a tough sell. Although I understand that you could be getting Travis Kelce for the next 5-10 years, whatever. Exactly. What about any of these other tight ends from this 2021 class? I wouldn't mind just taking a quick detour here. Talk about maybe Pat Freiermuth. Anybody you want to mention from this class?
Yeah,
I definitely want to hear about the Moose.
Yeah, dude. Well, I coined a little nickname, Friar Tud, because he's scoring touchdowns at such a high rate. Not sure if that catches on like all of my other stellar nicknames, Ty, but I digress. Anyway, he's looking like a sick, like, you know what it kind of reminds me? It kind of reminds me of, I think it was rookie season Hunter Henry, where he put up double-digit touchdowns, red zone beast, didn't give us a ton between the 20s. I think that's what he's going to be, and I think that's what the offense is conducive to. Like, obviously, you're not comparing him directly to Heath Miller from Steelers teams of old, but Heath Miller was never a high yardage guy. He depended on, consistent mediocrity from a yardage level and then some touchdowns here or there because Ben loved to throw to him in the red zone. And I think Freiermuth can definitely be that. So he's the only one who I'm ready to say is creeping into that like top 15 of dynasty tight ends for me as far as other tight ends than Kyle Pitts. But I like me some Brevin Jordan, Ty. I was saying we were chatting a little bit about the show earlier, and I called Brevin Jordan. I said, if you like Jordan Akins with upside, you like Brevin Jordan. So that's more of a long-term taxi stash, though. You got your Kylan Gransons, your Hunter Longs, Tommy Tremble, who's a nice little player. He's had a little bit of flashes as a rookie. And then Trey McKitty in Los Angeles, but he's pretty deep on that depth chart. Any of these guys other than Freiermuth that you are intrigued, Ty? And then, of course, feel free to wax about your boy.
No, I mean, I'm not really like Kylan Granson might be somebody I'm keeping my eye on. And then the Rams guy, Harris, or what's his name?
Jacob Harris. Yeah, I think
Jacob Harris. Season, thank you. He did, yeah. But other than those, there's a few guys in specific situations who are athletic freaks who I'm keeping my eye on. But other than that, it's definitely show me a little bit, and then I'll buy high on the as they build up. I'm a big fan of letting the maturation process happen and then buying high on these tight ends. Obviously, Kyle Pitts is just a massive exception.
Well, and I think the maturation process for these guys is stretched out long enough that within that we can see the signs that would tell us we want to get that guy as a throw in on a trade. You know what I mean? So I don't like when you say buying high, I think you kind of mean, you know, that level of high isn't necessarily that high that you wouldn't want to buy anymore. So, yeah, you just got to kind of keep an eye on the signs. Just look for lots of volume coming their way and look for kind of path to opportunity for these guys. But, yeah, it's an interesting group. There is some athleticism there, but Friarmouth, baby, is it Friarmouth?
It's Muth.
Muth. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
noted.
fans are chanting it. Every time he touches it.
I like getting my pronunciations right there. Okay, Ty, I'm going to dive into another group of these rookies, but first I want to say what up to our friends Monkey Knife Fight, and thank you to our friends Monkey Knife Fight for supporting us. As I say at the top of every show, we are presented by MKF, and they provide the most fun to play player props on the internet. Our DFS partner, our promo code for Monkey Knife Fight is TNFF. And what that gets you is an instant match on your first deposit of up to $50. I am working on sweetening that deal a little bit as well. So I got some feelers out to get that a little sweeter for the people. But as of right now, it is an instant match on your first deposit of up to 50 bones. So you'll get $100 for dropping 50. And you can go play. Usually, Ty, you and I will drop a couple of bucks down on the Thursday nighter, and this week we've got the Patriots and the Falcons. So I'm just going to go through a couple of quick ones, not to take up too much time, but a couple of my favorite lines from that matchup. Mac Jones at 245.5 yards. I would shoot for the under on that one, just expecting a slow, ugly matchup. Atlanta currently gives up 255 passing yards per. Mac Jones averages 233, so it's pretty close, but Damian Harris is looking like he's back from the concussion protocol, so I think the Patriots will lean on the run there. Damian Harris, speaking of him, Ty, his line 60.5 rushing yards. I would say that he's going to go over that. I think they're going to lean on him. I know Ramondre has shown very well, but I think Damian Harris might break one off, probably scores a touchdown. And then this is a big one for your boy, Ty. Jacoby Myers, his line is 55.5 receiving yards. He's actually only hit that number 3 times this year, and the last time was in week 5. What say you on that 55.5 receiving yards for Jacoby Myers, who just scored his first professional touchdown in week 10?
That felt good. Sure, give me the over. Why not, Falcons? I think maybe it is a very run-heavy game script for the Patriots. I definitely do imagine that, especially when they're getting close. But maybe Jacoby Myers gets a big play in this game.
I like it.
The Falcons, the Falcons have, they haven't been like allowing that much.
Bad, no.
Yeah, like I think they're like bottom 5 when it comes to. I'm just gonna look it up here really quick. Yeah, so they're allowing just over 150 receiving yards per game to the wide receiver position, which is bottom 10. So not the best matchup because they have been kind of a run funnel here. So maybe it's a lot of Damian Harris, Ramondre Stevenson, and maybe even in the passing game, they're using guys like Brennan Bolden and Kendrick Bourne, who knows. Yeah,
give me the under on Jacoby with those 55.5 receiving yards. That's not to say he couldn't get another touchdown and go 2 weeks in a row, though, buddy. Make it happen. Okay, Ty, so I'm going to get into these rookies here. Couple of running backs that I want to talk about. Travis Etienne is the first one up, and it's an interesting case to study because he has yet to take a regular season NFL snap. He does have that first-round pedigree, but there's a lot of unknown that's surrounding him. You got Urban Meyer and the shit show that he's running over in Jacksonville. James Robinson putting up another running back one season. Of course, college teammate Trevor Lawrence is at the helm at quarterback. But I want to hear from you, Ty. Like, what does this all mean for Travis Etienne's dynasty stock? Let's start with that. Has it changed much from our preseason out, or would you say that it's fairly similar, provided like the coaching staff stays the same coming into next year?
I mean, it's hard not to drop him a little bit because it's tough. Like, I don't think people's opinions have changed that much, and they'll remain either higher or lower than consensus, depending how they feel about Travis Etienne as a talent. But I think he falls, instead of being like a second, third round dynasty startup pick, he's probably more of a 4th or 5th round dynasty startup pick all of a sudden. And, maybe that's because there is a fat, like, Javonte Williams, Daryl Henderson, Kareem Hunt, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins, James Robinson, David Montgomery, who's, there's a lot of guys here, Josh Jacobs. Go down the list. There is a lot of running backs in this range of a dynasty startup, and they could fluctuate depending on your specific draft as well. So, it sucks because we've still yet to see the Clemson combo with he and Trevor Lawrence. And I was very excited to see how Etienne would be used. So I remember we were talking about how it was reported that Urban Meyer had interest in Curtis Samuel. Kadarius Toney was confirmed by him with that interest. So, it's obvious that he wanted this explosive weapon in the offense. We were talking how we wanted it to be Laviska Shenault. Still doesn't appear that Urban Meyer agrees with that concept. Like Jamal Agnew is getting up most of that juicy work as well. But because of how electric Travis Etienne can be with what we've seen, we should be pretty encouraged, I think. And not to mention Trevor Lawrence will be a big sophomore breakout candidate. I think the Jags offense overall will be kind of a buy low candidate. They'll be a buzzy team, I think, heading into next season for fantasy. And I'm really confident that Etienne will translate to the NFL very well when he does make his appearance. He can make people miss, and that translates. Per PFF, I think he forced a missed tackle on about 32% of his carries at Clemson. So not even factoring passing work there. That's pretty outrageous because we know what he can do in the passing game. He's going to break off a ton of big plays on the ground, and we're really hoping he carves out a decent role in the passing game as well. And then, he just had a really big nose for the end zone as well. So I think he brings a lot to the table, and there's no way I'm giving up on Travis Etienne. I think he's going to be somebody I'll own a ton of next season.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I have him as my dynasty running back 20, so I'm still pretty bullish on him. Right in the tier with those guys that you said, like your Clydes and your Hendos and stuff like that. And I think, he can do like you said, just explosive plays. Like what I like about Daryl Henderson is that he breaks off a bunch of big plays, and I think Travis Etienne can do that probably with a little bit more electricity and just that floor pass catching that we're going to see. Give the guy 10 carries a game, and he's going to be pushing for running back one numbers. So I think that's really well put. And I think come this time, the start of the 2023 season, we'll probably be talking about him in that tier with those top guys. But I'm curious, Ty, he had that injury this year. We didn't see him. I'm curious where you have him in relation to a couple other running backs got injured who have a lot of question marks around them as well. And that's Cam Akers and J.K. Dobbins. It's kind of forgot about that. We're going to have a nice little crop of running backs coming off the IR in 2022. But where do you have Travis Etienne in relation to those guys? I love me some J.K. Dobbins. And then Cam Akers looks like his job got half taken by Daryl Henderson. So where's Etienne with those guys for you?
Yeah, and I think some people might be saying the same thing with James Robinson and Travis Etienne. I just think Travis Etienne might serve a certain niche in this offense, especially having had Urban Meyer draft him. I also just love my first round running back hit rates as well, and Najee Harris is perpetuating that one. So Travis Etienne, J.K. Dobbins, and then tier below is Cam Akers for me for sure. And I know we covet the system with the Rams there. We usually want the lead running back. I want to see how Cam Akers looks. That's a very serious injury. And yeah, Daryl Henderson has more than carved out a role. And I do have Daryl Henderson ranked ahead of both J.K. Dobbins and Cam Akers. So Travis Etienne, I'm still clearly a little bit higher on. And then J.K. Dobbins, I think you could argue for him in the same tier. I just think the pass catching work will be on in different stratospheres between those two.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. I actually have Henderson and Dobbins back to back at 18 and 19 respectively. Travis Etienne at 20. So it's like a tier of those guys for me. And much like yourself, I have Akers a tier below at running back 27 for Dynasty, because I think, he can still put up some numbers on limited work himself, just like Daryl Henderson's going to do, just like we expect from Travis Etienne. Another guy who's looking explosive is Javonte Williams, Ty. In that Denver backfield, he's been sharing work with Melvin Gordon, but Javonte has been one of the top chunk play running backs in the league. Hasn't been putting up astronomical numbers. I don't think we've necessarily even seen the full Javonte breakout as of yet, but we know that he's forcing missed tackles at one of the highest rates, if not the highest rate in the league, Ty. But I'm curious, just as a rest of the season kind of outlook for Javonte Williams, because he does have that Melvin Gordon thorn in his side. And say what you will about Melvin Gordon. He's putting up a little bit of chunk plays here and there as well. It's just that his chunk plays 9 yards and Javonte's chunk play is 14, 15 yards. You know what I mean? So what do you think happens the rest of the season? Javonte outsnapped Melvin Gordon for the first time this past week. Do you think that's a trend that we're going to see and we might actually see the Javonte takeover? Or do we think we might want to pour a little bit of water on that one for now?
Well, I think like it's kind of semantics when we say like, yeah, he finally outsnapped him, but it was 58% to 42%, 57% to 43%, 53% to 47%. Those are Melvin Gordon's the 3 games before. And then it was 57% to 43% for Javonte. So, that's not a huge difference in the total number of snaps, and the high leverage work is actually a lot of it. Like they're splitting a lot of it, whether it's goal line work, whether it's pass catching work, but it sucks to admit, but Melvin Gordon's just been more efficient than Javonte Williams, and he's actually outscored him in 7 of 10 games in fantasy football. So that's the big one we have to look at. And it just comes down to a lot of things. Like the coaching staff is down with the running back by committee approach and the quarterback play, the defense, the easy strength of schedule. It's all lent to the run game. So the rest of the season, I think they just continue to split, and we're going to take a lot of lumps with Javonte Williams, even though we're kind of screaming for that breakout game. And yeah, it'll come here or there. I just think it's going to be hard to predict, and Melvin Gordon isn't going anywhere. But that's this year, you know what I mean? And if you expect Melvin Gordon to leave, then, I mean, he's in the final year of his deal, right? Just thinking of it for Dynasty, I think a lot of people are going to be like, I look at some lists and he's like a top 5 running back in some people's Dynasty rankings. Wow. Just assuming that Melvin Gordon's going to be gone, and I guess an inconsequential name will replace him. But I don't know if we should bet on Javonte turning into like an elite running back for fantasy in the near future. And that's like my argument is that that's pretty close to where he's going to be valued heading into 2022, or at least where he's valued right now in trades. Overall, I think the situation is just kind of hard to buy into. Like the strength of schedule will be far worse next season. Who knows if this offensive line can stay healthy or ever live up to their potential? But most importantly, like what does the quarterback play look like? And like how much touchdown upside like actually exists in this offense? And then like how heavily do they even want to lean on the run game, right? Like they have Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Timmy P, Noah Fant, Albert O. Like they have a lot of weapons, and they play in a pretty potent division when it comes to some of those offenses. So going forward, I think you have to hope Melvin Gordon doesn't re-sign, because he's actually been, more efficient in the passing game, even though both guys have been really good. Like both of them have extremely good catch rates, but Melvin Gordon's averaging a full 2 yards more per reception, and they're essentially splitting work in the passing game, basically splitting work at the goal line too. And that's where MG3 has had just way more success than Javonte, right? And the touchdowns have been like the only difference for fantasy. So, and it's tough because I thought Javonte would easily kind of win that goal line job. He's the best tackle breaker in this running back class. And, he kind of is the goal line back in Denver. Like Javonte has 6 goal line carries to MG3's 5, but, and they each just had 1 last week. Like they're splitting goal line work, but, Javonte's converted just 1 of 6, and Melvin Gordon scored 3 times on his 5. And, like it's even more pronounced in the red zone. Like I think Melvin Gordon has over 20 red zone carries to Javonte's 15 or so. Yeah. So I get that. Like for Dynasty, I understand. Like Javonte Williams is super young. He's super talented, and he's checking all these boxes. Like you were saying, Trav, he is averaging 0.37 avoided tackles per attempt on PFF. Crazy. The next highest running back with 50 plus carries is both Browns backs. Actually, I'm just looking at this: Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. And they aren't even averaging 0.3 avoided tackles per attempt. So Javonte, the highest forced missed tackles rate of any running back in this class, coming out of North Carolina, completely translated to the NFL right away, but it hasn't really translated into top 12 running back performances in fantasy. No. Because he's sharing so much of that high leverage work. So I know that was a really long-winded way of answering that, but I just wanted to hammer home that you can be really good at football and still not be worth what you're going for in Dynasty. And I think that might be the case with Javonte Williams.
Yeah, I think that's pretty good. I think, I think I'm in that camp that thinks he does take over the job as the lead guy. I actually have him as my running back 15. I think we've seen that even with Teddy Bridgewater in there, like with adequate enough quarterback play, I think there are targets to be had for the running backs in this running back room. So I think, that's a big if to say that Melvin Gordon's going to be gone and that nobody's coming in to kind of take over some of that role. But I think that's going to be the case because Melvin Gordon's always kind of had that nose for the end zone. He's always been that guy who's been pretty trusty down near pay dirt. And I think if they bring somebody else in to be kind of a second fiddle to Javonte, I think that guy probably isn't going to be as good as Melvin Gordon to kind of command that work from Williams. So that's kind of what I'm hinging on to say that Williams he's actually my running back 15 in Dynasty, just because I think that's going to come. And I think the explosiveness is just going to continue. I think I see him as kind of like what Nick Chubb does. And I think his target upside is a little bit more. And that's kind of lofty because I hold Nick Chubb in very high regard, much like you do, Ty. But I think Javonte is kind of along those same lines once he gets that role. So it's going to be interesting, though, because people are paying a lot for. I wouldn't be surprised if he sneaks into the back of first rounds next year, honestly, if it shakes out like I'm saying. So you're definitely paying for almost ceiling prices, but hitting that ceiling is going to be worth it.
Yeah, and I don't think running back 15 is outrageous at all. That's pretty close to where I have him just because of how young he is, pretty much. And you know, you might want to take him over an Austin Eckler, who I have at running back 11 or 12 or so in my dynasty rankings, or even a Joe Mixon or whatever. So I totally get that. What I don't get is how I got Devonte Smith versus Jaylen Waddle so wrong. I really like Jaylen Waddle a lot more than Devonte Smith. I think these two will be kind of attached at the hip, comparing against one another for a long time. And maybe it doesn't matter because of how different they are, or at least how different they're being used. But who do you want more in fantasy? Do you want Devonte Smith or Jaylen Waddle on your fantasy roster?
I think I think it is Devonte Smith for me, and not just to be an Eagles homer. I just think like there's kind of only room for one guy to produce in this offense. And I think it's just become very clear over the past few games that it's going to be Devonte Smith. They kind of unlocked a little bit of what he can do. And I think Jalen Hurts is starting to trust that more. I think the coaching staff is starting to trust that more. He's got 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. He had that big 116-yard game in week 9 against the Chargers, who are pretty stingy against the wide receiver position. So I just think like maybe not the alpha body type, but I think he has the alpha skill set. And not to say that Jaylen Waddle doesn't have that, because he has a very high upside skill set as well. I just think there's more competition for the top target on Miami than there is for Philly. We've seen them focus on the tight end position, as we've seen Philly do as well, but not so much this season. Mike Gesicki is getting lots of Tua's targets, was getting some from Jacoby Brissett as well. And yeah, I just think like, not to say that the Eagles offense is the picture of perfection by any means, but I think there is, a lot of turmoil coming to Miami as far as what are they doing with Tua. Deshaun Watson comes in and I definitely would probably change my tune and say Jaylen Waddle, but that's yet to be seen whether they want to do that. But I just don't necessarily know that this team is going to throw the ball nearly enough to support him. And then with Devontae Parker and Will Fuller whenever he can get on the field as well. Like I don't think he has that upside that Devonte Smith has.
Yeah, it's hasn't been there so far for Waddle, especially like the ceiling is what's frustrating. Like I think he's averaging about 13 points per game PPR. Devonte Smith's averaging like 12.6, so he's actually outscoring him a little bit. But Waddle's just a really low ceiling in the confines of his offense right now. Like he's been a top 12 wide receiver just once, and he's actually only been a top 24 wide receiver in 4 of 10 games. Meanwhile, Devonte Smith has been top 24 in 5 games. So, even a slightly better floor, and he's been a top 12 wide receiver in 3 games now. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. Like Devonte Smith has over 600 yards on just over 40 catches. Waddle has 60 catches already this season.
Yeah.
But like crazy. Barely 550 yards receiving. Like it's crazy that Jaylen Waddle is a wide receiver 1 just 10% of the time, wide receiver 2 just 40% of the time, but he's on pace for like 100 plus catches this season. Like that's insane. 100 catch season is pretty crazy.
And he's capped out. His weekly high is 83 receiving yards. He had a 10 reception game where he only had 70 receiving yards. Obviously, he got 2 touchdowns in that game, which was in week 6, but those were his last touchdowns of the season. So much like you said, Ty, like just the upside just doesn't seem like it's there for such a high upside seeming player.
And it's frustrating because it makes it like, so you really have to adjust stuff post NFL draft. Like there was lots of questions coming out about both of these guys as to where were they going to play. You know what I mean? And Devonte Smith has barely played in the slot. He's playing in the slot barely 10% of the time this year. Meanwhile, Waddle has been in the slot about 65% of the time. And that's just one of the reasons, like the average depth of target has been so different between these guys. Like both are between 22 and 24% of their team's targets, but Waddle's average depth of target is 7, which is less than half of Devonte Smith, whose ADOT is like 15, over 15. What's really weird, though, I think, is that the yards after the catch just hasn't been there really for either of them, but for Jaylen Waddle especially, because I think it was Scott Barrett's tweet that I saw this on in the offseason, but among all Power 5 wide receivers since 2014, Waddle ranks second in career yards after the catch per reception coming out of college. So I really thought he'd be able to do more with these quick targets, and Tua is definitely feeding him these quick targets. So I really think that there's room for this offense to explode next year. I know we were saying that heading into this year a little bit in Miami, but I still have faith in the former college teammates in Tua Tagovailoa and Jaylen Waddle resurrecting that chemistry in 2022. Like I still would take Jaylen Waddle slightly over Devonte Smith.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's fairly close. I would definitely say this is a buy low window for Jaylen Waddle. I mean, I've got him as my dynasty wide receiver 25 right now, and there's some guys with a little bit of age ahead of him. So I think, by this time next year, he's going to be a top 20 dynasty wide receiver. I just think Devonte Smith is going to be just that as well. In different fashions, though, like you said, the yards after the catch haven't been there. I think that's going to come way up for Jaylen Waddle. Where I think Devonte Smith might turn into, a bit of a volume getter as far as his production, but we'll see how it goes. I've liked what I've seen from both of these guys, and I would consider going out and spending up for both of them as well. Okay, Ty, we talked about Devonte Smith, obviously Philadelphia Eagle, who is my boy. Not your team of choice, but one of your boys that I want to talk about, who's seemingly fallen off the face of the planet, and I see that grimace on your face, and I totally understand, but Trey Sermon in San Francisco has just been buried by Lil Shanny on that depth chart behind Elijah Mitchell, the late round rookie. Even JaMychal Hasty, Jeff Wilson's back in the fold and getting some snaps as well. Do you have any hope left for a Trey Sermon 2021 sighting, Ty?
I mean, there's always hope, and we like that late season strength of schedule, but there's no doubt, like, Jeff Wilson might be a better stash for the rest of the season. I mean, Jeff Wilson is a better stash for 2021. And in Dynasty, like, you're not dropping the guy or anything, but yeah, I'm definitely eating a lot of crow. Very disappointing rookie campaign we got going here. And frankly, it's almost impossible to not have Elijah Mitchell ranked higher at this point. Like, he's been absolutely excellent. And it sucks. Not much of a role in the receiving game. Like, we're seeing really defined roles in this backfield, like this running back by committee and Shanahan's offense is sort of frustrating. Like, I don't know. I wish we could see Elijah Mitchell unleashed a little bit, is what I'm saying. Like, he has several 100-yard rushing games. I think only Jonathan Taylor, Derrick Henry have more 100-yard rushing games this season, and he's just crushing over expectation. Like, it's the talent as much as it is the situation that we've coveted. Even though we've loved it's a great, like, I think Elijah Mitchell's 18th in carries, top 10 in rushing yards, and after contact, I think only 2 players on PFF are averaging 4 yards after contact per attempt this season or more on minimum 50 carries. Those 2 backs are Nick Chubb and Elijah Mitchell. And I think only 6 running backs who've seen 50 plus carries are sitting at like 3.5 yards after contact per attempt or higher. So it's been really awesome. And it's kind of important because the 49ers aren't doing as well yards before contact per attempt wise.
Yeah, good call.
Which I think that could creep up. Like, they have been a top 4 run blocking unit according to PFF now in 2018, 2019, 2020, and they're the second highest graded run blocking group this season. So I think that could go up. So my question to you is, and I know I kind of dodged the Trey Sermon question, but what do you want me to say? Is like a running back 4 or 5 in dynasties, you're not going to drop him. Hopefully he's not the next Rashad Penny. But Elijah Mitchell, is Elijah Mitchell a running back 2 in Dynasty?
Yeah, I think he's right there. Let me peek at my ranks there. Okay, so I have him just outside in the early 30s, but that's just because I'm not so sure that his standing or any running back standing in the San Francisco backfield is super secure for the long haul. That's the only reason, or else I would probably have him inside my top 24. He's doing what we expected. Right? I don't think we necessarily expected a fat target share coming from the San Francisco running back with choice. He is the running back 35 right now on, let me peep what it is from a per game basis, but he's doing everything you want him to do and more. This is what I was kind of hoping for from Trey Sermon. And Elijah's doing that. So I have him tentatively close to the top 24. But I just don't trust Shanahan to not flip-flop here.
I want to ask you a couple NFC West running backs here. So what about Chase Edmonds or Elijah Mitchell in Dynasty?
Chase Edmonds, I got him a few spots ahead.
What about Cam Akers?
Cam Akers by a little bit, but I might change my tune a little bit on that one now.
What about Tony Pollard?
Tony Pollard, I have ahead of him. Yeah.
I think somebody we haven't talked about on this episode yet, who's a rookie running back in Gang Green, would be an interesting one as well. A couple green running backs. We got Miles Sanders, Michael Carter. Those guys are both close to Elijah Mitchell in my rankings as well.
Yeah. A few. I definitely have both of those guys ahead, but Elijah's creeping up. Maybe I'm not quite as bullish on Elijah Mitchell and
I think it's a fat tier. Like I could throw in Damian Harris, Zach Moss, Leonard Fournette. Yeah. Like there's a lot of guys in this range that I think are justified as like RB2 to RB3 range. It's a fat tier.
Yeah, absolutely. And AJ Dillon, I would have in that area as well. Yeah, you said the next guy that I want to talk about though, Ty, Michael Carter. I have him ahead. Where do I have him? I have as my running back 26. I am into Michael Carter. I really like what he's been doing, proving himself as the most effective back in the Jets backfield. We saw earlier, Ty, in his only 2 games with over 70+% snaps, he was actually a running back 1 in both of those. So he gets his opportunity and he produces. Of course, they get a little bit healthier with Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman in the backfield, and he's back into that 50% range. But in week 10, Ty, he got 18.2 fantasy points as a running back 2 on only 52% snaps. 24 opportunities on only 52% snaps in week 10 with 16 carries and 22 opportunities. Check that math. 16 carries and 6 targets. So it looks like the team, even though his snap share is coming down, it looks like the team realizes that when he's on the field, he just needs to be a focal point of this offense. Do you think, would you say he's nearing Dynasty running back 2 territory for you, or are you not quite sold on MC yet in Gang Green?
Yeah, I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater there. Like I told you where I had him, totally. In that tier, you know what I mean? And I think I probably would select him higher than Elijah Mitchell in a Dynasty startup for the one reason that I know I could get Elijah Mitchell the next round, you know what I mean? But I think they're very comparable in terms of what you should be valuing them in trades and stuff like that. He's a borderline running back 2 in Dynasty for me. And yeah, I think it's impressive what he's done. He's over 18 points in 3 of the last 4 games now. Yeah. And I think what we should say is his fantasy success, right now and even going forward, I feel like it will be tied heavily to his usage out of the backfield, in the receiving game. How much is he getting used in the passing game? Because if you look at over the last 4 weeks, no running back has more than 24 targets except Michael Carter, who has 31. So it's been pretty outrageous, and that's how he's accomplished these 18-plus point games here. And he really has carved out an amazing role in the passing game, even with Ty Johnson kind of having a big role on third downs. And you look at his 13% market share, he's top 10 among running backs in targets and receiving yards. He's averaging almost 10 yards after the catch per reception, 9.9 right now for Michael Carter. But still a heavy running back by committee element to what we should expect from Michael Carter forever, in my opinion. I just don't think he's going to be an Alvin Kamara type, in my opinion. He could be Alvin Kamara light, DeAndre Swift light, but I think his usage will always be in a committee on the Jets. And like you mentioned and alluded to, he's barely playing 50% of the snaps, and Ty Johnson out-targeted him last week. So heading into 2022, we have to think, hopefully the era of absolute god awfulness is almost over in New York. That's what we have to hope for the most. And maybe some decent quarterback play from Zach Wilson in year 2. And, at the running back position, my other problem is that we could see a bigger threat to Michael Carter than Ty Johnson and Tevin Coleman, who, has always been dead to me for years now. So I think it's going to be a tough sell for where Michael Carter is going to be. You know what I mean? And like we could just see somebody who comes in and takes the goal line role too, like the red zone role more, and which has definitely been Michael Carter's over the past few weeks. So I think his rest of the season value might even be higher than what I actually have him valued as in Dynasty. Like I'd probably still want the Travis Etienne's over him. Definitely like a Javonte Williams, head and shoulders above him.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think those guys are a couple tiers above. Our buddy Kyle Senra asked in the chat, Michael Carter or Etienne. He's leaning towards Carter. I think there's probably a tier difference between Travis Etienne and Michael Carter myself. I have Carter in the mid-20s and Etienne at running back 20 for Dynasty. But yeah, I think for me, Ty, it's similar to what you just said. I think it's just unfortunately the fact that he's a bit of a smaller running back means that if somebody else comes in, aside from that pass catching, the carry load could get taken from him. And some of that lucrative red zone work that we like just doesn't seem like it fits his profile. So big plays and pass catching work. Yeah, for sure.
Like the scheme in the quarterback play kind of worries me long term too. Like, do they end up just going like heavy pass or what? We could see that we were talking about how we don't know if it's going to be like a mini LaFleur, a lot of 12 personnel, or if it's going to be a heavy 3 wide receiver McVay style thing going on with the Jets. And if the passing game gets going, if Zach Wilson is who they think he is, then they'll probably be throwing the ball a lot. And that actually might be less targets for the running back, especially if that running back isn't the third down back, which obviously we could see his role kind of shift a little bit too if they were to bring in an early down banger in the offseason. It's just there's a lot of questions, I think, and a lot of obstacles that Michael Carter might need to overcome to be like that bona fide RB2. Like I think he is, a lot of this is opportunity driven because of the targets over the last 4 weeks.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah. I think like the upside of him as a player, because there's no doubt he's a good player, does warrant maybe going out and putting feet. Like if you're making a bigger trade, see if you could tuck him in there as kind of
the type of player I like.
Back your way. Yeah. He's a nice little guy to have as like your running back 3 or 4 on your team, because any given week he can put up that running back week like he did a few weeks back when he had over 30 PPR points. So very, very nice little start for Michael Carter on a dumpy situation in New York.
So maybe we could go to some quarterbacks here.
Sure.
It's a tough conversation because super flex owners are really in tough when it comes to, let's just start with Trevor Lawrence actually, because that's who they're really in tough with. But almost all these quarterbacks from this class have underperformed when it comes to what we had to pay for them in super flex, not to mention watching guys like Najee Harris, Jamar Chase, Kyle Pitts all just go off. So what do you think about Trevor Lawrence? Like, where does he land in your dynasty rankings? Is he still like a quarterback 1, like a top 12 guy? And how much would you be willing to eat when it comes to trading for or trading away someone like Trevor Lawrence?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think I would trade him away right now because I think his value is definitely going to get higher. I think you just kind of got to ride it out with him. I do have him as a top 10 dynasty quarterback at quarterback 9. So I think better days are definitely going to be ahead. I mean, he hasn't really come into the most secure and stable situation. He's got some decent pieces around him, but maybe not the right person kind of guiding the ship. So I think he will turn it around into that. I don't know if he's going to be that kind of all-timer type guy, but I think he's going to be one of those guys who does settle into a year 12 option for us because he gives you a little bit of that rushing work. And it's just been a weird season. Don't you feel like, Ty, like good, bad, ugly, indifferent, whatever his season may be, his season's just going really under the radar as far as number 1 overall pick who's supposed to be this kind of once in a lifetime dude. I just think like, obviously it's a product of him playing for the Jags, and maybe his coach doing some shit that overshadows his season. But I just think we aren't really looking into Trevor Lawrence's season as much as maybe we should. And a lot of things aren't going as I expected them to.
Well, let me lay some of it out for you because
lay it out, please.
It's really gross. Like the ceiling was always up for debate, right? Like there was a lot of things we could have pointed to in the offseason, but the efficiency is what we were hoping for but that's what we've really like where he's really let down. Like he's given us zero efficiency this year. He's 10th 100%. In attempts, 25th in passing yards, 8th in air yards, 18th in completed air yards. The touchdown passes were why we were worried about the ceiling. And here we are, just 8 touchdown passes thrown by Trevor Lawrence this season. And Lawrence has been a top 12 quarterback in fantasy in just 1 of 8 games. According to Rotoviz, like Next Gen Stats, he has one of the worst expected completion percentages as well. So it hasn't just been this situation, but I mean, the ceiling is definitely really hard to imagine just turning around overnight too, because the marriage with Urban Meyer was another thing we're kind of concerned about. And it's really all played out, like the lack of efficiency, the downfield passing hasn't been there, and even what he's added or not added with his legs. So lots of that is stuff that we'll use as arguments for Trevor Lawrence heading into 2022. Like I still have him as a top 12 quarterback, but it has been that bad this year for Trevor Lawrence in almost all facets. And it's just amazing because I'd probably take someone like Russell Wilson over him in a dynasty startup in a super flex draft. I'd probably take Joe Burrow, the other most recent number 1 overall pick before Trevor Lawrence. So it's definitely impossible not to say that he's lost a lot of value over the last 6 months or so. Whereas somebody like Trey Lance and Justin Fields, they've definitely lost a lot of value too, but you can obviously buy them for a lot cheaper. And they might end up offering you similar upside when now that we've seen Trevor Lawrence up until this point in this offense.
Yeah.
Like, how long do you want to wait?
I think the difference is that with Lawrence, it's not for lack of trying, right? Like he's got 2 games under 30 pass attempts. Teased us in that first week with a 300-yard game, but you said he's got 8 touchdowns. He's got 9 picks. So no bueno for the guy who's gotten the opportunity. And those other 2 guys you talked about just haven't really gotten the opportunity, which is why I think we're still kind of tantalized by going in on some Trey Lance and some Justin Fields, because we've seen some flashes. We've seen Justin Fields throw some dimes and get no help from his wide receivers. We've seen both of those offenses undergo quite a bit of shift and some injury this year. So I just think it's hard to really say that we've painted the picture yet for Trey Lance and Justin Fields. So I'm still in on those guys. Like I have Justin Fields right behind Trevor Lawrence as quarterback 10, right behind him, Trey Liggity Lance at quarterback 11 in Dynasty. So it's a little tier of those rookies right there. But I think they all still have way better days ahead. And those 2 particularly haven't even scratched the surface.
Do you have Jalen Hurts above or below those guys?
1 spot below Trey Lance at quarterback 12.
Yeah. What about Deshaun Watson? That's the other one.
1 spot ahead of that tier. 1 spot.
Yeah, really, that's interesting.
At quarterback 8.
Yeah, so I have,
it's like I'm kind of throwing this year out for that because Deshaun Watson, like if he's on a team right now and active, he's probably damn near a top 5 dynasty quarterback for me. You know what I mean? So I'm still like betting on the fact that we're going to get like 5 or 6 more years on a stable organization for Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, and it's interesting because those are the 2 I would go out and try and acquire instead of a Trevor Lawrence. I mean, and now would be the time. But even in 1 quarterback leagues, like they had ADPs in the 2nd round of rookie drafts for Trey Lance and Justin Fields because of what they could offer. Trey Lance, somebody I definitely whiffed on. Like we expected more right away and hoped for more, but it's hard because he's a small sample, small school guy. So we always have to consider that Trey Lance was more of a developmental guy anyways. And his attributes, like the arm strength, most importantly, what he adds with the legs, like both those land to fantasy success. So I think that's why we're all still kind of in on Trey Lance, at least for because the price might have dropped, right? And it's probably dropped more than it has with someone like Trevor Lawrence, who nobody's selling that low on him. And then we add in the scheme, the play calling, the play action, the weapons on offense for the 49ers. I think Trey Lance is. So did I hear right that you have Justin Fields ahead of Trey Lance?
Yeah, I do. You know, I was pretty bullish on him coming into the season. I think I had him at quarterback 14 coming into the year, thinking that he would take that job early, but he took the job not as early as we thought. We just haven't necessarily seen the production. The last 2 weeks have been good for Justin Fields, so I'm holding out hope, but I missed on him kind of like you did on Trey Lance, so no biggie there, buddy.
Do you think it's going to be like a new regime? Like, is Justin Fields going to be in a position where he has to learn a new playbook in his 2nd season and all that?
I think, unfortunately, that probably is likely, but we have seen, like, if they make the right hire, we have seen some of these new coaches come in and put in a nice offense that can work around a young quarterback. So I have, I don't know if I necessarily have faith in the Bears to bring that guy in, but I don't not have faith, like, I don't necessarily, I can't say for sure that
And
I
maybe
think
it's a
they're not
whole
going to make
new
the right move.
regime, like and
Exactly,
hopefully it's a
right? So
whole
maybe
new
they just
regime,
turn
like
it all up.
GM thing
And
too.
this quarterback that you have has a very specific skill set. So you would think that they're going to like build a staff around that guy who can take them to the next level. So I don't know.
And
I think
Fields,
don't fuck that up, guys.
yeah, and Fields has like 38 yards rushing or more in 4 straight games. He's already 4th among quarterbacks in carries and rushing yards. I think he's just 1 carry too from inside the 5-yard line this season. Like he's the only quarterback with 40 plus carries to not have multiple goal line rush attempts. So, but the concerns, like they really go back to the team for me, like that protection, that offensive line, the red zone trips just have been few and far between. They're scoring like under 17 points per game. Like it's just a mess there. Including the coaching and play calling. And only the Texans have put up fewer yards on offense this season than the bad news Bears. And thinking about this this upcoming offseason, like I think people are going to be like, oh, you add some weapons to the sophomore guy, but you think of how much work this team needs, including up front on that offensive line. The fact the Bears probably have to let Allen Robinson walk, or probably want Allen Robinson to GTFO at this point. I'm not sure the weaponry is going to be all that improved in Chicago. Like, can Darnell Mooney turn into a true number one? Is Cole Kmet ready to explode? Like, I'm just not sure about that, especially if all these young guys are learning a new playbook in 2022. So definitely not ready to give up on him because of what he adds with his legs. But I think a lot of these quarterbacks, I'm feeling like we might have rushed the gun a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think,
expectations.
You kind of have to now with these Russian quarterbacks, right? It's like the old Thomas Dimitrov line: until you find that franchise quarterback, the search for that quarterback eats you alive, or whatever it is. That's what it's becoming in fantasy. You want to find that Konami code top 3 type quarterback who's going to give you the rushing work along with the passing work. So I think like it's kind of a risk it for the biscuit situation, and I just don't think we're dead in the water just yet, Ty. So I think it's going to be okay for those guys, and I'm happy with the process at this point. I'm not too worried about it. Ty, one thing that our viewers on YouTube can see behind me is a little bit of gold. And with that, I do want to give some love to our friends at Trophy Smack. That is my championship belt from the Kings Classic right there, shining behind me as a staple in my backdrop now. And that's just kind of a glimpse into one of the products that you can get with Trophy Smack. So if you want to take your league to the next level, you need to go to Trophy Smack, because there is a plethora of options. You can get custom design belts like this, custom design trophies. They've got fun trophies for league losers, all sorts of that stuff. And we have a promo code with them, and that is TNFF. And with that promo code, if you buy yourself one of those shiny new belts or a flashy new trophy, you will get a free championship ring. It's super cool. It's a really like huge ring that you can flash in your league mate's face. So big shout out to our friends at Trophy Smack. So please go check it out and get something for your league and support Trophy Smack, because they support us, and we can't thank them enough for that. So that promo code is TNFF for a free championship ring with a belt or trophy purchase. So thanks for going and checking that out, guys. I'm going to get into some of these guys, Ty. We just crossed the hour mark, and it's been so good to get back in the lab, buddy. I'm having an absolute blast right now. So I'm going to keep us moseying. We got a group of wide receivers here, Ty. We got Rashad Bateman, who has burst onto the scene the last 4 games, at least 6 targets in his first 4 games with the Baltimore Ravens. We got Rondelle Moore. He's had a couple blow-up spots himself, showing some of that after the catch ability and showing what the Cardinals could do with him if they scheme towards using Rondelle Moore. Elijah Moore is currently saying, "Move, bitch, get out the way," to the rest of the pass catchers in New York. Looking really, really good, doing it in all facets, in all areas of the field. And then my boy, talk about whiffs, Ty, Terrace Marshall. I definitely whiffed on Terrace Marshall's 2021. I thought he might have some of the most upside of this wide receiver class, but definitely been a bit of a flop on that year 1 production, but he's still number 1 in my heart, Ty. So I still believe in Terrace Marshall. But with all of these guys having, a little bit of production on paper, why don't you tell me, Ty, like who's your favorite guy out of this group? Who do you have ranked the highest, or who has the most upside, or just kind of tell me what you think about this group and your favorite guy out of it.
So yeah, Terrace Marshall, I think, kind of falls out of the group for now. Just until we can see stuff sift out in Carolina. He's just so clearly behind DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey, and then Robbie, and the lack of quarterback play there, and just the uncertainties going forward.
Little Hat Newton back in the fold.
Yeah, totally, and looking good, and gets Washington. Yeah, must be nice. But I think, I'll give you my favorite, and that's Rondelle Moore in Dynasty. I think Rondelle and Elijah Moore are very close. I have them in maybe 2 tiers higher than Rashad Bateman. I think Rashad Bateman's my clear least favorite. And my concern is that he does play in such a run-heavy scheme. Lamar is gonna be Lamar. And in the passing game, he is clearly behind Hollywood and Mark Andrews. He has so Rashad Bateman's 20% market share. It's worth less in a Ravens offense than it would be in a lot of other offenses, right? And the work Bateman is getting is just not even close to as valuable as the work the other two are getting. Hollywood, for example, he leads the NFL in targets that travel 20 plus yards downfield, deep ball targets on PFF, and still since week 6, which was Rashad Bateman's debut, nobody has more deep ball targets than Hollywood in the NFL. And Bateman is even being targeted closer to the line of scrimmage than Mark Andrews, who has 5 deep ball targets to Bateman's 3 since week 6. And it's a pretty similar story in terms of Bateman, being third in the pecking order and clearly behind the run game when the Ravens get in close. So Bateman is somebody that I have a lot lower than these other guys. Rondelle Moore is kind of a next year play too. Like, it's kind of frustrating how he's been used. Like among wide receivers with 20 plus targets, Rondelle Moore's average depth of target of 1.95 is the lowest. Nobody else has an ADOT below 5. Like, he's really having
running
a 2020 Debo season there. It's Debo style last year. It's driving me nuts. So I'm not trying to take anything away from like his ability after the catch. Ironically, it's just Debo Samuel who's averaging more yards after the catch per reception among wide receivers with 20 plus targets this year. But we really thought like Rondelle, even at his size, could be used as more a guy like an explosive element out of the slot. And it's just frustrating because, why can't we get a little bit of both from coaching staffs? Like, we've seen Curtis Samuel be used in 2 completely contrasting, ways in different offenses. Like, can't we just put those 2 seasons together and just get a guy? That's what we thought we might get from Rondelle Moore, maybe even a little more special, so long as he stayed healthy. But I think there's a lot going on there, and including Arizona just being a far more run heavy and wanting to control that clock a lot more, being more competitive, and just still using other guys down the field. So it's just week 2's blow up game against Minnesota. Like, that was Rondelle Moore's only awesome. Top 24 finish. Moore now has like 5 straight games with 25 yards receiving or less, but attached to Kyler Murray in this Kingsbury system. I love the talent. So I'll still be really high on Rondelle Moore in Dynasty and probably heading into 2022. Like, I imagine I'll consider Rondelle like a really strong breakout candidate. Christian Kirk, final year of his deal. AJ Green, 1-year deal. So we'll see what happens with those guys. But a lot of upside for Rondelle Moore. And everybody knows how much I love Elijah Moore too. Totally. The Moore boys panning out.
Yeah, give us more. You love DJ Moore too. I'll give you that as well. So you're all about that more. I actually have Elijah over Rondelle, and just by a couple of spots, because I think like for me, I love Rondelle Moore, but I'm not sure that he is ever higher than second on the totem pole for this team. Just the way they use such a plethora of wide receivers, like you laid out, Ty. We've seen it this season, kind of the rebirth of Christian Kirk and the rebirth of AJ Green to an extent have kind of contributed to Rondelle, being anywhere from 2nd to 4th, 5th, if you insert the tight end on the pecking order for the Arizona Cardinals. So I just wonder about that with their kind of heavy reliance on the wide receiver position. They're always going to have that stable looking strong. And I'm not sure that Rondelle has the profile to be the alpha like DeAndre Hopkins obviously does. Whereas I think Elijah Mitchell might already be first in the pecking order for the New York Jets. I mean, he's already been in the slot over 25% of the time that he's been on the field. And there's been a significant portion of his significant time on the field where Jamison Crowder has been healthy. And so he's commanding slot snaps from Jamison Crowder. I put out a tweet like 2 weeks ago, so it doesn't factor in this past week, unfortunately, but he was top 10 in points scored in the red zone over the previous 5 weeks to that. So I think just the high percentage of usage on the snaps that he's been in there. He's making the most of that. You know what I mean? That was what I was saying about Rondale earlier in the season, that sure, he's not playing a huge snap share, but he's getting work on the snaps that he's getting. Well, that's tailed off a little bit, and that's kind of come into play for Elijah Moore. And I think he's just making more of that usage. So I've got Elijah Moore a little bit higher, because if you give him really good quarterback play, if you give him a stable offensive system that's producing and high powered, I think we could see more than what we've already seen him flash this season.
I love Elijah Moore's playoff fantasy strength of schedule this year too. We know how rookies do over the second half of their season. Definitely a big fan of him, but he's still playing behind Jamison Crowder. It is infuriating. Yeah. So hopefully by then he is playing more snaps than Jamison Crowder. He's playing a full array of snaps, running routes like crazy, and Elijah's usage has been kind of frustrating. But he actually leads the Jets in deep ball targets. He has a dozen of them, and we know how suspect the quarterback play has been for the Jets. So if that can improve, and you think about one of my gripes with Rondelle Moore, like both these guys have 44 and 45 targets respectively so far this season, but 12 of Elijah's have been balls that travel 20 plus yards downfield compared to just 3 for Rondelle.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And that can definitely be a big difference in my rankings, and that's why, like, you know, I have these two guys pretty high, but I think they're both kind of plays for next season. But this is definitely, if Elijah Moore has a good second half of the season, it's going to be this will be the last chance you can even buy a little bit high on Elijah Moore.
He's kind of like the Michael Carter of wide receivers. You know what I mean? Like that, we're buying into it.
Trav, Kadarius Toney, is he a wide receiver 3 for Dynasty?
Is he a wide receiver 3 for Dynasty? Let's see where I got him. Ty, I got him just outside. I got him at wide receiver 39 for Dynasty. I just think there is too much uncertainty in that New York system. You know, you got Kenny Golladay there, who will, as long as he's there, he will siphon some deep work. That's all he does pretty much, is take deep targets. And so that's just kind of where I'm sitting. I'm not so sure on Kadarius Toney yet. I think I've liked what I've been seeing. He's been elusive. There's been some chemistry with Daniel Jones, but I need to see a little bit more, because I wasn't such a believer beforehand. So I'm not going to use a small sample size to just immediately rocket him up my rankings. You know what I mean?
Do you want Toney or do you want Golladay in Dynasty?
I want Toney in Dynasty. Yeah. Absolutely. I want Toney. I think Kenny Golladay is more like thorn in the side as opposed to guy that I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And Kadarius Toney, I'm having a tough time with, because I shouldn't be saying that, you know, Rondelle Moore might not have a great finish of the season. Elijah Moore, you know, is doing this and this, and these are next year's plays, but then say that Kadarius Toney like hasn't done this much this season, so therefore he's ranked way lower. But it kind of does feel like he just had one good game against Dallas in week 5. Almost half his fantasy points came in that one game, and he had 13 targets in that game with all the injuries that had piled up back in week 5 there. Toney has had 9 targets since week 5, and with Golladay, with Kenny Golladay back in the mix, like, it felt like we got a glimpse of how crowded this passing game is. And then now we're adding back Saquon Barkley, add in Sterling Shepard eventually. Yeah. So don't really love him rest of the season. And then even in Dynasty, like, Sterling Shepard is under contract through 2023, I believe, and Kenny G through 2024. And, you know, it's not like Toney will ever be that kind of downfield high play. Anyways, he's going to be pretty reliant on those yards after the catch and making guys miss. So he's amazing at doing those things. And the catch rate has definitely really impressed me, surpassed even my expectations. I just think his value, it could jump the shark. Like, he could be a player in my opinion that's more valuable as a trade chip than as your wide receiver 3, which is where I think you'll see him in a lot of dynasty ranks next season. Yeah.
Totally. And like, it's kind of like a more heightened version of what I was saying about Rondale, is that, like, he's not going to be number 1 on the totem pole for these guys. If he's not going to be the deep target. You said Sterling Shepard's name there. Sterling Shepard's only played 2 games since week 5 and hasn't looked as explosive as Kadarius Toney, but in those 2 games, week 6 and week 8, 22 targets, 15 in one of those games. So I don't think Kadarius Toney's ever going to be the volume guy either. So it's just kind of 2 strikes against him type deal. And I'm not ready to buy in. Not to say he can't do it. Looks like a guy who could give some efficiency on lower volume, but yeah.
Speaking of lower volume, Kenneth Gainwell or Chuba Hubbard? You can only pick one for your dynasty team. Who do you want?
Oh my
Kenneth Gainwell,
goodness.
Chuba Hubbard.
I don't know, man. I think as far as the talent, I like Chuba better, but as far as the situation, I think I got to go with Kenneth Gainwell just because like his path to work is today. And Chuba Hubbard's path to work is when Christian McCaffrey gets injured. You know what I mean? Chuba's looked really good on that. Like he gave us a couple of good weeks for holding down the fort for our teams, especially for me in the Scott Fishbowl. Thank you, Chuba. Big shout out to him, friend of the show. Go back and check it out on the YouTube channel. We got the chance to interview Chuba Hubbard as a fellow Canadian coming up. It kind of is still a little bit surreal to think about that we chatted with an NFL player, Ty, but we did that. And but yeah, as far as the dynasty perspective, I think Kenneth Gainwell just has an easier path. And not to hate on Miles Sanders, but there's weeks where Kenneth Gainwell was out targeting Miles Sanders, who by all accounts is a stellar receiving back. So the past couple of weeks haven't been a vote of confidence for Kenneth Gainwell, but I think these guys are kind of like throw-ins on trades at this point for me. But I'm curious to hear what you think, because I know you love you some Memphis running backs.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both, dynasty stashes at best. I think Kenneth Gainwell, I'd probably take over Chuba Hubbard just because I think he could carve out some standalone value. And I think no matter what happens in Philadelphia, he could be used in the slot. He could be used out of the backfield. I just really like Kenneth Gainwell as a talent. They seem to try to get him involved early on in the season. So Chuba Hubbard obviously will be behind Christian McCaffrey, in my opinion, so long as he's there. So I just think Chuba is going to have a tougher time having standalone value, and he's going to basically be an elite handcuff for the time being. So Kenneth Gainwell, maybe I'll just take for the possibility that he ends up, being an RB1 for extended periods of time. But I actually am not super attracted to either of them in a startup draft. Yeah. What about Ramondre? Ramondre Stevenson's the guy I'm going to bring up, but Damian Harris should be playing on Thursday night, just to get that out there. So we got to put a pause or a halt on the Ramondre season, son. That's not going to happen quite yet. Actually, they could both get in the end zone easily against Atlanta this week. But what do you think about him from a dynasty perspective? Like, do you think he's a running back 4, or where do you have him valued? Is he in that range with a Chuba, with a Gainwell, above or below? Where do you think he
I'd put him above. I'd put him above those two for sure. Just I think, he's in a situation with a rookie quarterback who should have some staying power in that role. An offense who has periodically, when needed, trusted him already as a rookie. An offense that relies on the running back position. And it kind of looks like the running back usage is changing a little bit for the New England Patriots. It used to be like 4 or 5 different guys soaking up here and there. Brandon Bolden has flashed this year. But Ramondre looked like the real deal as the runner. And I think if we just temper our expectations for him and say that if he gets the job, we expect him to be like a mid to back end running back 2, I think he's going to be just fine for you. If you expect him to give you running back 1 numbers, he's going to disappoint you. So I really like Ramondre. I think he's a tier above those other 2 guys just because we've seen him have a path to work. And I think Damian Harris wasn't standing on the firmest foundation himself, right? He's looked really good this year, but I don't think he's got this job on lock. So I think Ramondre could step in, could vulture some work there. You look the past 2 weeks when Ramondre's had 30 carries, he has had 7 runs of over 10 yards. So that's almost 1/3 of his runs going for 10 plus. So he can put up some chunk plays in the run game. And he can give you a little bit as a pass catcher as well, but that's not what I'm expecting from him. But I definitely like Ramondre as a stash for your bench as a running back 4, maybe 5.
Yeah, I think maybe roster construction or depth kind of decides if I'm going to take any of these guys, whether it's a Chuba Hubbard, a Ramondre Stevenson, because like Damian Harris's rookie deal does run through the end of next season. So maybe this is a play for like 2023 with Ramondre Stevenson, which is always a risky bet in dynasty leagues at the running back position. And I think maybe the only other guy I would think of is Khalil Herbert. I think just to get his name out there, he's an interesting name. I might have ranked in that range as well with some of these guys. And then, you kind of wonder about do I even want one of these guys? Do I want a Daryl Williams? Do I want a Ronald Jones? Maybe a veteran like Melvin Gordon. So definitely guys you're looking at later on in your dynasty startups at the running back position to round out your running back room.
Yeah, absolutely. Khalil Herbert's looked pretty good when he's gotten the shot. Kind of similar to Ramondre. I just believe in David Montgomery's staying power in his role more so probably than I do Damian Harris's. But definitely a good look, and it's always good to stash those late running backs because they burst onto the scene and they win you your leagues, in my opinion. We've seen it time and time again with these guys. So stash them all, man. Just freaking stash them all. Who's the guy? Jarrett Patterson in Washington's another guy. Jermar Jefferson scored a touchdown for Detroit this past week, but he's behind DeAndre Swift. I think he just got hurt as well, but just some other names like deep taxi squad stash. Ty, we're at $120. Do you think we should call her? We've got a whole bunch of names left on the list, but I think, do you want me to just rattle some off? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and I think guys like Zach Wilson, we can talk more about when we've seen a larger, sample. I think Mac Jones is just too chalk right now that you're moving him up in Dynasty, somebody who's seen an ascension in his value. And then like the wide receivers that we would have mentioned are guys who are behind even like their wide receiver 5, 6s at very best. You know what I mean? Maybe Nico Collins or Amon-Ra St. Brown or someone, but I'm probably still taking like a Christian Kirk. Yeah, Dion, but I'm still taking like a Christian Kirk or like a Curtis Samuel or like veteran players, probably over those guys still, I think, at the back, like to round out your wide receiver room. So yeah, nail anybody you wanna get out on though for sure. Josh Palmer, good, go Canada.
Yeah, Josh Palmer, oh Canada, baby. He had a touchdown in the past, like maybe not this past week, but the week before.
Dwayne Eskridge.
Dwayne Eskridge is out there. Tutu Atwell. Anthony Schwartz too, man. Odell's out of the picture. Jarvis Landry is by no means. Yeah, Demetric Felton. Anthony Schwartz is kind of a deep threat type guy. And Donovan Peoples-Jones I like as well, but Schwartz brings something that they might not necessarily have in Cleveland with Odell out of the picture. Yeah, that's kind of all I got, Ty. You got running backs. You got your Chris Evans, Larry Roundtree, Javion Hawkins, wherever the hell he's playing. I think, did he go? I don't know.
I do love Chris Evans. Chris Evans, somebody I'll definitely have on a lot of deep dynasty, like 30 roster taxi squad kind of leagues.
It's too bad Joe Mixon's put a stranglehold on that roll. Hey, buddy. Fucking Mixon. Love it.
Yep, Mixon plus Samaje. Yep.
Yeah, a little bit of Samaje. Yep. Mike Wright actually nicknamed Samaje way back in the day, the fantasy hitman, the pain bot on some of the early episodes when Samaje was just coming in. That never caught on, but anytime I think of Samaje, I think of the pain bot. So shout out to the hitman. That's all we got though, Ty. Really want to thank everybody for checking it out, hanging out with us, hitting the comments. We really appreciate that. Make sure you hit us up on the site and the socials. The site is truenorthffb.com. The socials are truenorthffb. And on Facebook, it is True North Fantasy Football. Just the whole shebang there. Thanks again to our sponsors, Trophy Smack, Monkey Knife Fight, and we are, of course, proud members of the Fantasy Points Media Group. There's been some new teams added to the media group as well. Big shout out to them. We love the whole crew and Fantasy Points and what they've been doing to support our brand. So lots of love to spread there. Ty, you got any parting shots for the people?
Nope. Sons of DFS tomorrow night.
Boom. And then Point After, actually, I believe, has made a move to Saturday night. So keep your eyes peeled for that because they'll get you prepped for a fun Sunday of football. But that's all I got tonight for Tyrell McLaughlin. I am Trav. This is the True North Fantasy Pod, and we say peace.